I'd like to thank you for subscribing to our platform. Our goal is to provide you information the bought off lamestream fake media will never touch and never address. And we bring you the best guests anywhere, not only on the internet, but any guest that we bring forward. I can assure you the bought off lamestream fake media is either not going to like or they're not going to support. And the reason is because our guests are freedom fighters of the highest order, and I can't think of a better guest to have with us today than Senator Patrick Kolbeck. Now, I'm a bit biased. I consider Pat a friend. He's a friend of all of us. He is a warrior on the front line for freedom, for free markets, and for liberty. As you know, I never, underline never, bring someone involved in politics, a politician, to the forefront on my show Operation Freedom or on this series of the Insider Insight shows. I don't consider Pat a politician. Yes, he is a senator. He is the most freedom-based person in politics I know. He is a unique individual. He gets heat from liberals. He gets heat from, quote, conservatives. He probably has as many people in the Republican Party trying to suppress him as he does people in the Democrat Party. And the reason is because he pulls no punches. He's honest. He can't be bought and paid for. And he fights for freedom. He plays it right down the middle. Let me give you a little background on Senator Kolbeck. Pat is earned his bachelor's and master's degree, both in aerospace engineering from the University of Michigan. Pat has spent 24 years of his life in management and consulting and in the engineering world. This is why he is so unique in the state of Michigan legislature. He's a scientist. He is truly a space engineer. And he brings his factual-based foundation and background to every piece of legislation he brings forward. He's incredibly unique. He was elected to the state of Michigan Senate in November of 2010. He has served admirably. He has served every citizen of the state of Michigan like no other. He is now running for governor of the state of Michigan. It's my honor to have with me Senator Pat Kolbeck. Well, Pat, welcome to the Insider Insight Show.
Great to be with you, Dr. Dave, and you've been an inspiration to me early on. Matter of fact, when Angie and I were just getting started in politics, it was all the inspirational talks we heard from you that got us onto the right track. So we appreciate everything you've done.
Well, I thank you for that, Pat. And you have battled so many entities in your career. You know, Pat, what has been your biggest win, if you will, once you got to the Senate?
Yeah, there's a couple big wins, but the biggest is the one that everybody said was impossible to do, and that was making Michigan the 24th right to work state. And that was a long haul. We were being told, I mean, as a freshman legislator, I was being told this would be a 20-year project, and we got it done within 2 years. Mm-hmm. And we did it with a strategy I call the Philippians 4:8 strategy, focusing upon what is noble, true, excellent, and praiseworthy. You know, I represent Wayne County, which is the home of the UAW in mm-hmm. Michigan. When I was out knocking doors during my first election, I was knocking out in Flat Rock, about a mile away from the UAW local headquarters, and I saw a gentleman with a UAW bumper sticker on his F-150 pickup truck. And as I went up to knock on the door of that home, first question he asked me was, "What's your position on right to work?" And I said, mm-hmm. "Well, it's about restoring that fundamental freedom of assembly back to rank and file workers. I'm all for it." He goes, "Would you like to put up a yard sign on my front lawn?" And that was before I started looking at the economic benefits and associated with right to work, about how it actually improved the employment number of jobs in the state. That was a big deal. So a lot of the candidates in this gubernatorial election are talking about the economic improvement we've had over the last 8 years or so. Mm-hmm. And there's definitely a lot of economic improvement but I can trace almost all that economic improvement back to that fundamental decision to restore that freedom of assembly back to our rank and file workers and make Michigan a right to work state. The hockey stick goes up right around the passage of that legislation.
But Pat, you took immense grief prior to passage, during the passage, and immediately after.
Yeah.
And in fact,
we did.
In fact, we're the folks that are running against you in the primary on the Republican side, they were mute on the issue, weren't they?
I don't recall Lieutenant Governor talking about it. I don't recall Attorney General talking about it at all. No, I was actually wrestling alligators back then as a freshman legislator. My Senate Majority Leader did not want to take up right to work. He had promised a lot of the unions that it would not be an issue, that he would squelch it before it got out of the starting blocks. And I as a freshman legislator, kind of painted him in a corner with the help of a lot of grassroots activists and with the help of some air cover from some key party officials as well that were very active. And we kind of boxed him and Governor Snyder into a corner, and they finally agreed to push it forward.
Pat, what's been your biggest frustration since serving in the Senate for the past 8 years?
I think a set of misplaced priorities on the part of a lot of my colleagues. I call them swamp priorities, if you will, where they're putting their own career ladder above the best interests of the people of Michigan. They're putting the best interests of lobbyists above the citizens of Michigan. And, we've got a little bit of a divide going on in the Republican Party right now where I like to characterize this divide as between platform Republicans and fraternity Republicans. Fraternity, it's all about their individual relationships and their climbing the ladder, and the platform ones are the ones pushing for the freedom and prosperity and low taxation and that's inherent in the Republican platform. But on the other hand, you've got the folks that are just going to do whatever they need to do to get ahead on their own. And that's the biggest frustration. I want more people that are principled serving in public office.
Pat, we have a, quote, Republican governor, Rick, who I call Rick Jennifer Schneider, that has been serving for the past 8 years, who has not been supportive of you, and I'm being very kind when I say that. We've had Senate leadership that has not been supportive of you and your freedom-based efforts. Pat, it's to the point, and tell me if I'm wrong, but you have been suppressed to the point where you have been removed from committee assignments because of your focus on freedom and independence. Is that correct?
Well, I have indeed the only returning senator that was denied chairmanships. And by the way, that's after an exemplary record in my first term, chairing the state police and Department of Military and Veteran Affairs budgets, just to give you a snapshot of performance as that budget chair. I converted their budgets to performance level agreements or service level agreements where it was metrics based, where we were concerned about outcomes, not just throwing them a bunch of money and then coming back a year later and seeing what you think. I actually put together a series of targets, and we met with them on a quarterly basis, and we improved our veteran services in the state of Michigan from the worst in the nation to number 2 in the nation within 4 years. And so when I returned back and was not given any chairmanships, I was very curious as to why. And I sat down with the Senate Majority Leader, and he gave me 4 reasons. Number 1, I was too vocal in my opposition to Medicaid expansion, i.e. Section 2001 of H.R. 3590, known as Obamacare. By the way, I'm on the Republican side of that issue. Number 2, I was too vocal in my opposition to Common Core standards. By the way, I'm on the Republican side of that issue, and we're a Republican majority caucus. And number 3, he said I underperformed in my district and we already talked about passing right to work. I was a target of the National Democratic Party, not just the locals. And as a result, I was a couple percentages below what they thought I should do for that particular race. So it was, and then the last thing, he said that I need to talk at more of an 8th grade level with my colleagues.
Maybe more kindergarten level. Based on what I've seen.
Yeah, so after that, once it was announced that I was running for governor, my Senate Majority Leader, Arlen Meekoff, wasn't a big fan of my pursuit of the governorship. And so after attending a Right to Life banquet in his district without notifying him, he decided to relieve me of all my committee assignments. Now, on one hand, it's pettiness, but on the other hand, really what it was done the reason he did it was to silence my voice.
Yes.
When you're on a committee, you've got an opportunity to go off and shape legislation. And what he was trying to do is silence my voice. And that's really the common ingredient whenever people in the swamp are pushing policies, they make sure they silence any dissent. And I've seen this time in and time out. When Medicaid expansion was being considered out in the House, the Speaker of the House actually banned me from seeing the House floor because I was making too much of an impact on the other representatives. During the debate around increasing taxes for our roads, I provided an alternative to that as well, and I was banned from the House floor because I was lobbying them and telling them how to fix the roads without increasing taxes. So it is about silencing the voice, and in this gubernatorial race, it is very clear. They put out push poll after push poll and deny any mention of my name in those polls, and this is the media in collusion with the Attorney General. And they're trying to silence my voice once again, and the media is hook, line, and sinker along with it, even when there's things that normally would be newsworthy in their part to cover.
The swamp is not limited to Washington, D.C. It's my contention that there are 50 swamps in our country, and they all are focused at the state capitol level. And I believe, Pat, your experiences have shown that the swamp is infested with both Republicans and Democrats, really, which is why I say there's one political party, that being the Republicans.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I think what we're seeing with the electorate, though, is that Republicans, independents, and Democrats are all sick and tired of politics as usual. Mm-hmm. I've gotten very good support in this governor's race, matter of fact, from independent Democrats, because they recognize that I'm actually someone who is willing to speak truth to power. I told you about my role in Right to Work, and despite that, I had a gentleman that came up to one of our supporters. He had a bumper sticker on, and I was up in Stillman, Michigan, up in the UP, and he ran up to him at the gas station and said, "That's the guy I'm supporting." He goes, "Oh, really?" Yeah. He goes, and not only that, but everybody at my GM UAW people is supporting him as well. They told us to vote for Hillary in the last election. We voted for Trump. They told us for Gretchen Whitmer in this election. We're voting for Colbeck. And this is not an isolated case. People are just looking for somebody who's going to represent their best interests and speak the truth in that process. And I'm not a bomb thrower. I'll hit with both barrels on public policy, and I don't get personal on it though. And I think we've made a lot of progress and earned a lot of respect from people from across the political spectrum in that regard.
You know, Pat, I believe you should be the role model for every person running for political office, because you put people ahead of any self-interest. You speak to freedom. So I want to hit a number of issues, and I want you to give, if you will, as you normally do, very quick, concise position statements on these, because I think you serve as a role model for, as I said, our listenership is in every state of our country. We are, this past week, folks from 67 countries downloaded or heard live our radio show, Operation Freedom. I believe every one of our viewers, every one of our subscribers, every one of our listeners should consider supporting you, either with networking or funding, because I believe the election of Pat Colbeck as governor of the state of Michigan sends a huge message to every person even considering a run for political office in our country. Pat, let's hit each individual topic. Healthcare, your position.
I'm a free market healthcare advocate, and I've been not just recognized at the state level, but also at the national level for my free market healthcare solutions. A lot of them revolve around a loophole in the Affordable Care Act found in Section 10,104 of the Affordable Care Act. And yes, I did read that whole monstrosity. And it's for something called direct primary care services. And I've passed, it's not only legislation that promotes this care model in Michigan, but I've also put it in Wisconsin and Florida and Tennessee, pretty much everywhere I can get some free market advocates. And we want to make sure that they have an opportunity to enjoy freedom as well.
Pat, you set up a pilot project in the city of Detroit focused on Medicaid that will save the state of Michigan hundreds of millions of dollars every year.
Yep.
Yet, Pat,
Yeah.
you got immense heat for setting up that pilot project, which will bring better health care, more available health care, more affordable health care, more quality-oriented health care to every person on Medicaid that is exposed to your program in the city of Detroit. Who came after you on that, Pat?
Well, the health plans weren't excited about that, and the hospitals are not too excited about that as well. You know, the groups that are intended to take care of people. But the doctors were really big fans of it because they're tired of being micromanaged in their patient relationship, and that's what direct primary care does. It essentially eliminates the middleman between the doctor and the patient. And the best part is, you know, the insurance companies in particular should be all over this because it actually lowers their liabilities because people are kept out of chronic health conditions, they're kept out of the need for catastrophic care like hospitalization. It actually helps the bottom line. And where they've really adopted this in other states, what they've shown is that the premiums for the catastrophic care actually go down as well because they know that this is working. So I'm doing it on Medicaid, which is the single largest line item in our budget. You get 20% off of an $18 billion line item. That is 3.6 into the good for taxpayers. And you don't get those savings by rationing care, what some people like to do. You get it by doing what I know you're a big proponent of, which is preventive care.